video. So we just skip the video. We'll just start. So welcome everyone to the with sorry, welcome to the WITS weekly webinar, wherein every weekend we are having amazing women speakers from the different fields talking about data science and how it's impacting different industries. Um, so myself, Khushboo, we have been so I have been with WITS from last 3 years. Previously, we were having these conferences, a long day conferences, but because of this situation, we have gone online. So I am accompanied by two more ambassadors, which is Karthika and Julian, who's helping drive this whole thing. Uh, Today, we have Kavita with us, who is the head of data science in finite sum modeling, and she's going to speak about how data science is changing the face of the HR industry. So, welcome, Kavita, to the WITS Mumbai weekly Tech Talk sessions. Over to you for this session.
Thank you, Khushboo, and thank you, Wits Mumbai, for hosting me for this wonderful Saturday evening. I'm looking forward to talking about how data science is driving the changes in the HR industry and how the traditional HR industry is just not the same with the advent of data science. Just give me a second, I'll share my screen and then we'll get started. In the meantime, just to kind of give a brief about myself, I have been in the data science industry for around 13 years now, and around this time I have been working in different domains like banking, telecom, insurance, and HR analytics. So today I have chosen to speak on the topic, how is data science changing the face of HR industry, and we'll kind of look at what are the different aspects in HR as a domain which data science is today influencing, what are the different changes that can be driven through data science, and what are the different outcomes using the data science models that we can use within the HR analytics framework. I just want to start with a very easy kind of slide, but a very relevant one, if I can say so. So basically, when we go for an interview, we are asked some questions, right? And if you go for a data science interview, you are asked a lot of analytical and logical questions. So the gentleman here on the left asks the interviewer, "How many basketballs do you think you can fit into a school bus?" And he is like, "I have no clue why this question is being asked to me." And the HR manager thinks that if you could answer this, you would have been in Google. So most of the bigger data science companies like Google, Amazon's, Facebook's, etc., have a very interesting way of testing your skills, and that's what this talks about. And remember, the whole interview process is being aligned by HR teams. So there is the whole thought process that goes behind setting up these kind of logical and tricky questions. On the other side, on the right hand side, if you see, HR very proudly says that we like to bring together different kinds of people of different fields, different diversity, radically different people, and then we try to make them all work together. And if you see this diagram very nicely, it explains that how different kind of people are coming together to make an organization story a success. And of course, there will be friction, there would be exchange of views, there will be different thought processes, but out of this is what is born a strong organizational environment. Starting with the topic of the day, which is HR analytics. Now, HR has not seen drastic use of data science till now, but in the last couple of years, till the say 2022-25, we'll see a lot of growing trend of use of data science in the HR analytics market. And the global HR analytics market study says that this growth of use of analytics in the world of HR would increase at around 12% over the period 2019 to 2025, and it will be a cumulative growth rate. So a lot of changes you will see in the data in the field of HR within your organizations, in world's leading organizations, and most of the time these changes would be driven through the HR of the organization. Now, why are we talking about HR analytics being data driven? Because this is one stream where people have generally gone by their judgmental approach, right? Whenever we set up an interview, we look at what do we sense from that individual's personality, from the kind of answers he has given, from the kind of talking we have done, and then we make a decision whether a person can be selected or not. What we are saying here is where the whole world is talking about data driven decisioning, why not enable HR analytics to make more and more data driven decisions? And the reason why we are saying that at the top of any organization, or at the crux of any organization, lies the business goals. And if we are to achieve those business goals, then the whole organization should be moving in the same direction. And for the organization to move in the same direction, even HR should be driven towards the towards achieving that goal. And that is why when all the other domains in your organization is being driven by data science, then it makes more and more sense to make data science analytics as one of the enablers in your HR environment. Now the idea here is to make the whole process a little more efficient, a little more statistically more efficient, and then use it to make decisions in the HR environment. Now, what was the use of data in the earlier times is what we are talking here. So earlier, most of the time, the data that we collected as part of HR or human resource department was used as reporting and analysis. So, for example, we would like to talk about how what is the timing of hiring of the employee, how much time do we take to get an employee on board, what is the total cost that we incur while hiring an employee, how much time is required to kind of from the senior leadership to get a person on board before he finally joins the company, how do you kind of get him on board, and look at multiple matrices that HR personals generate to measure the working efficacy of a HR organization. Apart from that, what we are now talking is just the new hire part. Apart from that, HR is also involved in your entire journey through an organization, post onboarding, getting you into the system, providing you with all necessary enablers to make you start working, and then engaging you time and again with different HR activities, be it training, be it team development activities, be it fun activities. HR plays a crucial role in kind of strengthening the genes of the organization. So that's where HR reporting and analysis was very actively used earlier. Now what we saw was that based on the data that was collected, the reporting that was done, the analysis which was carried out, we would do more a reactive measure. We would take a reactive measure to any of these matrices. So, for example, if the people survey results were not great, we would go ahead and say that, okay, these are the different steps that we would take to revise the people confidence in our organization. Or, for example, if we used to see that attrition is very high, we would say that, okay, we need to do something to contain the attrition in the organization. But remember, all of these decisions were taken post the matrices were generated and the data was seen. Even, for example, the compensation benchmarking was done based on what we are offering today. At that point of time, there was no proactive reaction to any of these matrices or any of these numbers. What we are talking now as part of HR analytics is to get more proactive in terms of either preventing the attrition or trying to find out of 100 trainings that I have across my organizations, which of the trainings really help my leadership, my employees to kind of grow along the career path, and also to understand the entire organization network analytics. And in one of the further slides, we will talk in detail about the concept of organizational network analytics and how it strengthens an organization within itself. So this is what I would start my session with. We are talking of pre-era, where we were talking about more of HR reporting and post-analysis. Then we talked about the reactive steps that are taken by HR, and now what we are talking is getting more and more data science models into the system so that we can proactively talk about different things. So, for example, even compensation, calculation of compensation for individuals can be done using data science models, and that would be more accurate. Can we use some of the matrices within the industry and outside the industry to kind of fix the compensation for employees and make it more fair? That is what is being questioned here. Second, of course, we talked about attrition, where we know that attrition prevention is always better, because once a person attrites, it's already a cost to us. It's a loss to the organization. So what we are talking here is building models, attrition models, which will help identify the people who are more likely to churn or leave our organization, and then take preactive steps before, say, 3 months, so that the employee does not leave our organization. So that's where the power of data science will become more and more useful, and more operationally actively we can use the power of data science. Now we are talking about HR analytics in a snapshot. So we are talking about the different edges of data science. Now, HR people use these terms interchangeably, like HR analytics, people analytics, workforce analytics. But there is a distinct difference between the way HR analytics, people analytics, and workforce analytics is defined. Now, when we talk of HR analytics covers matrices of all the HR functions, such as time to hire, training expense per employee, cost of hiring an employee. These are all the matrices about which we talk within HR analytics. So this is more related to onboarding, bringing people on board, and all the training that you provide to your employees. When we talk of people of the organization, people does not comprise just your employees. It also comprises your customers, your first degree, second degree contacts, and all of these come under the purview of people analytics. Whereas when we talk of workforce analytics is even a larger term, where we kind of talk about even your on-site workers, remote workers, your freelancers, your consultants. So basically, I would say that your workforce analytics is a bigger circle, within which forms the people analytics, and within which is the HR analytics. Now, whenever we talk of these three people, the matrices around which we are talking about still remains the same. We are still talking about getting the right people, using the correct benchmarks to hire the right talent, and then retain the right talent, provide the kind of environment they are looking at, and be one of the leading HR functions of across organizations. Now, when we talk of talent management, that itself is a bigger area, or I would say a bigger ocean to manage. Now, of which recruiting and workforce planning is just one part. We are also talking about more and more usage of data science in calculation of comp and benefits. Remember, we talk about the compensation, the fixed compensation, the variable component, the bonus payouts, all of those. Now, all of those can be more and more streamlined using a data science model. You can use your historical data of your employees to predict the salaries that you would offer to your new joinees. Similarly, you also talk about performance succession. Performance succession again is a very important term, where you basically try to streamline the people's growth in your organization. And the moment you identify that your leadership in a particular function is moving to the next level, you try to identify his successor. And all of this has to be done in tandem with the HR. Of course, leadership sessions, employee data, and their engagement and assessment also form part of it. Now, what we want to do by bringing data science into all of this is tying it to the productivity of the organization. So basically, what we are telling is that if these are the visions, which is the green boxes, these are the vision that an organization is looking to conform to, then your HR should ideally work to achieve these with the help of the employees and the workforce in your organization. And the enablers to support this is just not the people in HR, but you need a very robust data management process to kind of build that entire pipeline of HR analytics, the data, how it has kind of spanned across the 5 years, last 5 years, 6 years, the amount of IT involvement in HR, because you also want to digitize your organization in current times, which we have seen in the last 2 to 3 months, where COVID has really kind of disrupted our life. What we have seen is that organizations, part of HR organizations, have to go completely online to onboard their employees, provide them the initial training and handholding. Now, all of this is only possible through the complete cooperation and complete involvement of IT department. Apart from that, consulting itself becomes one of the very key aspects of HR, because the moment you start bringing more and more data science into it, you need to have the knowledge, the niche aspects of HR as a domain and data science as a maths and science behind it, to bring it together to find out new insights and tools for managers to make better decisions. So basically, what we are telling to that today, the HR analytics is talking about getting the HR and the business data together and kind of working on it to achieve the company's vision and goals. Now, how has the HR evolved in the last few years? So, earlier HR was more of a employee count, right? We used to measure the fixed cost, the variable cost, the number of permanent employees, the number of temporary employees. This is what was HRA 1.0. And very interestingly, if you see, our HRA, or the human resource analytics, has evolved almost in line with the industrial revolution, right? So when there was the initial industrial revolution, HR started playing a key role of getting people on board, etc. But gradually, when we moved to industrial revolution 2, employees became very critical component of any organization. Their welfare was taken care of, insurance was provided, different kind of activities was supported by them, working conditions were improved to make employee experience better, and their payment was kind of being made more and more competitive within the environment to make them more loyal to the organization. And then came IR 3.0, which is your industrial revolution 3.0, and that's where we are talking about today, HRA 3.0. And of course, we are already in IR 3.4.0, which is even more advanced. But basically, in HRA 3.0, we are talking about how we can use our employees to assign them the right kind of work based on their profile, so that their performance is better. As an HR representative, I am also entitled to understand the career path of an individual, and based on his career aspirations and his career path, I am supposed to provide him a journey across the organization, so that his personal career goals are also met. So basically, all this data has to come together, and analytics has to enable the correlation between the employee engagement and the growth of the business. And that is why now we call HR as more of a HR business process, because it has become one of the critical pillars of any organization. And as we understand today, more and more HRBPs are kind of very closely working with the CEO of the organizations, the chairmen and directors of the organization, to get the organization DNA encrypted into each and every individual. Because the moment you start understanding your organization a bit more better, that's where the whole process of getting data science more and more into this becomes easier. So that's about the evolution of HR analytics. Now, how is human resource analytics visualized? So what we are talking here is a lot of data. And what is the kind of data that would be required to make a human resource function more and more strategic, more and more decisive, more and more, I would say, intuitive in that sense, right? So for an HR analytics function to work well, we need to have all kind of HR data for the organization, starting from different positions that are available within the organization, the employee history, the employee previous history. I mean, before he joins your organization, his current career journey in your organization. So basically, when he has joined, how soon has he been promoted, what has been his compensation revision, what are the different trainings he has attended, and of course, in the background, you also do all the cost calculation as to how much of cost we are putting into the employee transitioning, right? So all of these data has to come, and then there is another very important pillar of HR, which is your hiring process. Now, the whole hiring process has to be kind of more and more digitized in today's times. More and more automation needs to be brought in. Although we are not directly talking of automation today, but let me tell you that there are organizations which are moving towards greater and greater automation for the hiring process because of two reasons. One, it makes their life easier. You are not doing a manual process of filtering candidates and mapping them to the right JDs. You're also making this process more and more fair. You are removing any kind of bias that would have been there in your organization because of uh, uh, people intervention. So we are trying to make the whole HR process more and more automated, more and more robotic in nature. There are organizations which are today using automated workflows and NLP models, natural language processing models, to map any JD to the CVs they have, and then come up with the right set of CVs to track the individual's excellence for the job. Also, we are trying to do video interviews, more and more the automated video interviews, so that the entire process becomes more and more seamless, right? Now, the other important aspect, we have talked about the data part, we have talked about the automation part. I think the other important part is the online behavior, and that has slowly become very, very critical in today's organizations. I don't know how many of you are very aware, but organizations have started taking the online behavior of our employees very, very seriously. And when I say online behavior, it can be your behavior on LinkedIn, on all other social platforms. And people do use a lot of, at least most of the organizations I have talked to and known, use a lot of LinkedIn data to kind of filter who is a better candidate. And remember, when you are within an organization, your networking capabilities also defines your success. So people try to see as to how this person is connected across the industry, across other people's. So, and whether he is a regular poster, he does he regularly post articles, etc. All of these come as inputs to your HR analytics 4.0. Now, the other aspect which we are also talking about currently is advanced technology. So we are trying to use a lot of big data. We would use a lot of psychometric tests, etc., to kind of assess a person's personality, etc., before finding him right for the job or providing him the right kind of career path. Now there's a new perspective of HR analytics, and the reason why we are saying that there is a new perspective is because a lot of studies have shown that the more data driven and more involved your HR analytics is with the vision of the organization, it increases the profit margins of the company by almost 275 basis points. And that's a very important point to note, because now HR is not just being called off as an enabler of your organization, but what we are seeing that if you really want to build a strong organization, you need to have a very, very strong HR analytics driven organization, so that you are gelled into the entire vision of the company and are able to perform better. Most of the organizations which have a big success stories in today's world have a very, very strong HR analytics pillar, and this important part is critical to drive the growth of the organizations. Now, the question most of the HR analytics or people who are into HR analytics ask today is, how do we transform ourselves? So what is the way, how can we change the way we are currently operating so that we become more and more ingrained into the organization's DNA? Now the problem And I think that is a problem that needs to be solved in today's organization, because what is happening is there is a set of people who are traditionally very ingrained into the day to day work of HR. So to them, if you ask them that, okay, there is a new set of automation tools, a new set of automation methods that has come in which can help you do your work, they would say that we don't have time for all of this today, we are busy in some other traditional methods. Now, it is upon the leader to emphasize the importance of these newer trends, these future trends, these newer technologies that can be used very effectively to make your HR process a little more, I would say, automated, a little more fairer, and a little more advanced to meet the global requirements. So basically, you as an HR analytics individual, and I have been asked this question a couple of times when I have kind of spoken in different conferences, that what are the different ways in which we can try to enable. I think the best way to try to enable yourself to be a better HR analytics resource today is to start understanding your data better. So if you start looking at data within your organization and try to identify the problem, it's like any other data science problem where you need to slice and dice your data to understand what is working well for my employees, what is not working well. Is online training working well, or is classroom training working well? Am I able to kind of sustain the fun activities that I had planned to increase the employee engagement, or people are just not participating? Some of these questions can be answered only by looking through the data. So the more and more you digitize your data, you try to look at your data, you slice and dice your data, you'll be able to make better decisions with respect to HR analytics. Now, what we will do now is talk a little more about the data, the modeling aspects of HR analytics, and then talk about how AI and ML are driving some of the changes within the HR industry. Now, what we talk here is couple of things which are currently being used and couple of things which you'll see not being used in years to come. So we'll first start with the macro HR trends that we are seeing across the industry. Now, the macro HR trends that we are talking about is changing the workforce, right? Remember, we are in a situation today where there is a lot of generational diversity, and that's where the role of HR becomes even more challenging. Sometimes you will have a boss who will be, like, when I say boss, a senior leader who would come from a very traditional setup, and then you will have a millennial joining his team who has his own style of working and stuff. And remember, in India, the working population, or the age of young working population, is almost 60% today. So you will have a lot of millennials entering your organization, and then you will have to relook at the way you are kind of providing them the kind of environment that they are seeking out for a better career. Remember, there's a traditional, I mean, I have personally felt that there's a lot of difference in the style of functioning of the traditional people and the new age population, especially in terms of managing these resources. What I have seen is that micromanagement is not what works best for them. These are guys more independent thinking, more, I would say, risk taking individuals. So if you give them a task, give them a free hand to do it. Of course, when they come back to you, you can guide them. But millennials need to have a very different way of handling their work, the way they work within an organization. Also, you will see sometimes there will be a lot of thought process clash. There will be a lot of people who will start thinking in different directions. So HR also has a very important role to play there whenever there is those kind of cross cultural differences within the team. I think HR would play a very, very important role in ingraining the culture of the organization before anything else. So every organization has its own set of cultures, and what we are talking here is that once the person initial incubation into the organization is complete, he should more start thinking about how my organization perceives individuals, and work on that. The other thing which we have to look at is changing economic and business landscape. And what better way to talk about it than today's scenario, right? 3 months back, who would have imagined that the whole organization will be almost working from home? And in this whole process, I think HR has played a very, very strategic, very, very critical role to get everyone to work from home and manage the productivity and the employee engagement in a very critical way. Of course, globalization has another very important aspect, because currently most of the organizations you guys or I would be working with do not work in a local geography. They work within different cities and organizations. And it becomes important to tie back the role of within this the role of different people within an organization to bring up the right outcome. The third important pillar of an HR strategy is talent scarcity and talent optimization. Now, talent management itself is very, very critical. And the reason why I'm focusing on talent management today as part of this data science talk is because talent management itself is a journey. The way we talk about customer lifecycle management in a bank, similarly, we should talk about talent life cycle in an organization. And remember, every talent is different. So we are not talking about handling a particular account in a particular way. Here we are talking about individuals who have both emotional intelligence and all other technical skills together. So talent management again has a very, very critical role. You need to clearly understand, and that's where when an organization gets a new person, we ask the person to kind of fill his 1 year vision, 1 year time frame, goals, objectives, etc. And tracking of that on a very regular basis using some quantitative tracker is very, very important. Many organizations today use a scoring system to score their employees on different parameters. So how good his onboarding has been, then how good he is integrated into the team, as and when you deliver projects, how has been the feedback on those projects, how is your 180-degree, 360-degree feedback coming in. And when you have a data set to kind of cater to all of these, that's where you can use some of the models to see, okay, these kind of employees work better in these kind of roles. So next time I go out for hiring for this kind of talent, I should be looking at these kind of individuals. So those kind of generalizations using the data is very, very important. Also, employee engagement is very, very critical. The reason why we are saying that, because we have seen that if organizations are able to keep their employees well engaged, right, then they are able to kind of contain attrition, get the best people in the industry to work for them, etc. So employee engagement is again very, very important. Now, what is the way in which technology is kind of bringing this change? So today we are in a state where there is a lot of mobile applications which are there on our smartphones, through which we can do various HR related functions, right, within our smartphones. Similarly, all the HR data today either has to be moved on a cloud or a big data platform, because here we are talking about terabytes and petabytes of data which needs to kind of undergo processing when we build a model. And of course, the which I earlier also talked about, use of social media, how much you are focusing on the social media of an person, right? There is a very interesting kind of theory that the moment your employees are spending more and more time on sites outside of your company, right? So they are not spending time on intra-site or either, the more and more time they start spending on external sites, that's a very good indication that your employee might be wanting to attract. Of course, we have the measures to decide which are an external site and which are not. But having said that, those today, your online behavior, how you work on your system, what all you are doing on your office laptop is also being captured through different applications that are there. The other part is, which is more strategic is in nature, is HR has to come and show itself as more of a strategic partner, and be more working together with different functions in the organization to make it more wholesome. Now, what we are talking on the right hand side, if you look at it, there is this big data where we are introducing newer kinds of products and services, better decision making, and we are reducing the cost. But the whole idea of getting big data analytics into HR is because this is a place where you have a lot of unstructured data also, right? We are not talking about just structured data. There is a lot of unstructured data in terms of the performance assessment, the way people write the feedback of a employee, the way client writes your feedback, even the data coming out of a people survey might not always be all structured. So we are talking of reams and reams of data which are both structured and unstructured in nature to come together and tell your HR story. Corporates are also using a lot of virtual reality training methods to give better experience to the employees, and I think this area of using more of AR and VRs is going to increase with the more and more employees working from home. Also, there is a lot of emphasis nowadays being given, at least in the advanced organization, as to how you modulate your voice during an interview, how confident you sound during an interview, how can different facial expressions be recognized while you are talking. Someone gave me a very good example that when there is a meeting going on between different stakeholders, right? Today you have cameras which kind of capture the expression of individuals and can say that, okay, while this presentation was being made, 30% of the people were positive about it, 30% were neutral about it, but the rest 30% were negative about it. And this is just using facial expression to make a deterministic data. So those kind of things are also which is changing the way we are perceiving HR. And of course, a lot of use of machine learning algorithms. Now, some of the fundamental uses of machine learning and learning algorithms that is happening today is resume matching, right? So if I have to select the right kind of resume for a right kind of JD, job description, then I don't use my manual people to kind of look through or scan through the resumes. I just build an NLP model which will search some critical keywords, and based on that, I can search the right kind of resume. So all of these is kind of driving the entire HR industry in a very different direction. And I think I'll emphasize this point a couple of times in the presentation, is that everyone who is engaged in a HR function today needs to kind of step up and embrace all these new changes which are happening in HR. Now, what are the key trends that are being highlighted by some of the companies or the leading players in the market? Now, people data revolution is here to stay. And what we are saying is, in the last couple of years, we are not looking at people just as individuals, but we are looking at each and every person as a data entity. And as I earlier explained, the entire life cycle of an employee within your organization and his life cycle throughout his career. These two data itself is a huge data which can give you a very good direction of how fit or not fit a person is to kind of find a correct space in your organization. The second thing which we are also talking about is a lot of employee listening architecture, right? Because earlier, what we used to kind of focus on is just kind of leadership talks, roundtables, conferences, etc., to share the organization's vision with the employees. With a lot of facility of AR, VRs, and different modes of capturing experience, what we are encouraging today in the new HR analytics framework is employee listening. So, can we collect more and more data from the employee, use that as a feed into our existing HR system, and improvise the system, right? So that is what we are talking about here. Now, worker related data, 69% of organizations today are building integrated system to analyze worker related data, right? So earlier I spoke about getting all the data together like a customer record, have a employee record within your organization which will have all kinds of data, and most of these organizations are looking to build a real time dashboard to visualize their employee behavior, right? They are also using social media surveys and different aspects of data to kind of visualize the career journey. So these are some of the study or findings from Deloitte. And if I look at the right hand side of my screen, you will see that we are talking about some of the internal data within an organization, right? So what are the internal data within an organization that we can talk about? The employee tenure, the employee compensation, the employee training records, performance appraisal, his reporting structure, whether he has been identified as a high value, high potential employee, any disciplinary action taken. Of course, we can also start looking at the timesheets of individuals. We can also start looking at kind of projects he has delivered, even within an organization, right? If I have to select the right kind of person to deliver the right kind of project, we can look at a mapping of skill set to the requirement of that job profile or of that project, and try to map the right people to the right work. Similarly, the use of external data. So for the external data, we try to get into the company's organization specific data, passive data from other employees, historical data of our employees, to kind of enable our internal data, which is already there. So basically, what we are trying to emphasize is more and more data that you can get in, either of your current organization employees or from historical data, the more stronger the entire data analytics pillar can become. Now this is one, I think, one key aspect that I wanted to talk about. Any employee value today. Earlier, we used to say that an employee value is directly related to the human capital that he gets into the table. His traits, his skill sets, his managerial skills, his idea of delivering a project successfully. All of this was measured using a human capital. What we are saying is that today the employee value is just not his human capital, it is also his social capital. And when we talk of social capital, we talk about the relationships, the networks, how much of trust that manager has been able to build within the employee. And that is what is the crux of organizational network analysis. Now, this is a concept which is relatively new, but some of the organizations like General Motor, etc., use it as a very I would say, innovative way to evaluate how people show up in an organization. So Professor Rob Cross says, when they can provide an X-ray into the inner workings of an organization, a powerful means of making invisible patterns of information flow and collaboration in strategically important groups. So basically what we are saying is that once you have all this data, which we talked about in the previous slide, you can also look at how your people are networked. And you can look at an internal network and an external network. So for example, I'll give a very simplistic example. You have, as an HR, you also handle the outbox and the inbox data of organizations. Now, the more and more outflow and inflow of mails from your inbox to different people, right? You can use this data to build a social network analytics. And you can see that within a team, within an organization, or within a function, how well integrated people are. Add to this, you can add the social media data which is there. So are people of your organization within LinkedIn connected to each other? Those add a lot of value, because that shows that the employee is not only invested technically in your organization or as an employee, he is also involved emotionally. He also looks at LinkedIn as a bigger platform where he can voice the organization's marketing a little more. So a lot of these data which comes from social media and lot of internal network data, all of this together form the organizational network analysis. What has been also seen that employees who tend to have a tight network, right, who are more closely knit, who kind of are more closely exchanging mails with each other, exchanging more and more maybe calls with each other, they tend to perform better than teams which are a bit disintegrated in nature. So this is a very interesting concept, and I think more and more organizations who kind of should use organizational network analysis to kind of measure the fitment, the fitness of your department, your organization, and overall fitment of employees. So even, for example, the influence index, there is something called the influence index in social network organization. A person with higher influence index is generally considered to be a better leader than a person who doesn't have a very higher influence index. So all of these statistical and mathematical parameters are generally used to work around and find out the best resources within the organization, identify the best resource to fill in a particular open role, and all of those ideas. So organizational network analysis is a very interesting concept. I would urge all of you to kind of go back and read a lot more about how it is being used in today's organizations to kind of enable and strengthen the HR. Now we are also talking about AI powered HR analytics, which is like extension of data science. There's a lot of processes which is involved in recruitment, and AI can help you reduce this time by about 80%. It can not only reduce the time it takes to complete the process, it can also help you cut cost. Remember, we are not just talking about the time that it reduces, we are also talking about a very competitive environment today, where the faster you hire people, the better people you can get on board. So we are not just talking about the time benefit of it, we are talking about the cost benefit also, and we are talking about the competitive benefit also. What are the different things we can do by for improving the quality of hires? We can start looking at standardizing our job matching. We can start focusing a lot more on the keywords that help us identify the best person for the best role. We can use actually digitally scan all the resumes, or use the digital scanned resumes to kind of categorize applications. Now, this is again a very interesting aspect, where we can actually look at running a clustering kind of algorithm on resumes and categorize resumes into different compartments. And once this is all is done, the whole time cycle of shortlisting your resumes becomes more and more automated. Even when you are onboarding your employees, right? Currently, what happens? It's a very standard process that person will go through these training. Can I look at the previous profile of the person and provide him the right kind of training which will benefit him, one, in the current role, and second, on the basis of what he has already done in the past, can I kind of fine tune his entire training and engagement process with us? Also, of course, you can create the AI chatbots which can help solve matters much faster than a normal call center or a mail alert that is sent out, right? So this is the way AI is kind of changing the way HR is delivering. So basically, in the entire presentation, we have talked about use of AI. Now, what are the advantages of using AI? AI requires a lot of data, right? So the moment we start talking about use of artificial intelligence, you need to have a lot of data, working on big data, working on unstructured data and structured data to kind of refine this process. We are also looking at removing human biases, right? We talked about earlier. Consciously or unconsciously, HR is a function where a lot of biases seep in. So by use of lot of automations and AI, we can use this, removing this human biases. And also we are talking about skepticism associated with technology. So more and more you kind of adopt to technologies, better will be your process. So we need to kind of educate our HR and our HR's enablers to kind of learn more and more technology, which will make all of these sharper. So that is what is the focus of today's HR. And over the entire presentation, I think what we have talked about is how HR analytics is changing. What are the different ways in which you can use HR analytics? We did talk about attrition modeling. So basically, what we do in the process of HR attrition modeling is we take, say, 1 year, 2 years last data. We take all those internal and external data that we talked about, and then build a data science model, a machine learning model to predict whether the person will attrite or not. And this has generally been seen to kind of reduce the attrition rate within organization. So see, these are some of the very operational things in which HR can be used. Now the bigger question is, should an organization invest in HR analytics? Of course, from all the studies that we have seen, from all the way the HR has been changing, and from the ground report of some of the amazing companies that are kind of doing very well today, HR analytics is there to change. There has to be quite what do I say? Quite gradual but scalable changes in HR analytics, which will drive the HR analytics in a very different direction, starting from say last couple of years. A lot more predictive analytics will be used. A lot more machine learning models will be used. A lot of AI will be used to kind of automate and reduce the load on the manual HR work. And of course, to kind of make this entire process more and more strategic, we have to look at storing the data in a more robust way across the organization, across different departments. Because the moment you get more and more data, the bigger data, business problems related to HR can be solved. So myself being a big advocate of using data science in HR analytics, I would definitely say that the organizations or the HR leaders should start looking at and should start talking about a transformation in their HR analytics, the way it functions today. I think with this, I am towards the end of my presentation. Thank you, Khushboo, for having me, and I am open to answer any questions if there is.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Kavita. It was a wonderful presentation. We have a few questions. So, the first question is, what model would I use to figure out if I am being paid fairly? Would I need to know the compensation of others as data?
Right. So if you want to kind of see whether your compensation is fair, then you need to have others data, right? The other way of looking at it is use some of the industry benchmark studies, and using that you can understand whether you are fairly paid. But you can also look at using some of the internal data like the skill set data, the past experience data, the education experience data, all of this together to build a strong compensation prediction model. And based on that, you can kind of reach a level where you can say, yeah, I'm almost fairly paid, and I'm almost not fairly paid. But of course, you will need to have at least the skill set data, the years of experience data, past compensation data in some form or the other to kind of predict the compensation. And for this, you can use a neural networks model generally to kind of predict the compensations.
Okay. The next question is, how do we ensure the human touch is not adulterated with the whole analytics driven by algorithms? And would people develop hacks or ways to impress the algorithm rather than a human now?
Sorry. Yeah. So your question was regarding the use of HR algorithms, right? So HR algorithms can be the algorithms that we choose from a data science perspective within different streams of HR is very, very important. Now, depending on the kind of problem you're trying to solve, you will have to choose the right kind of algorithm. So, for example, if an employee enters and I want to kind of work through his journey, right, within my organization, I can look at similar skill set people in the past and build a clustering model, right? And that clustering model will help me identify that how these kind of similar profiles work within an organization. So clustering can be a very good way of looking at your employees as a aggregated group, and then come up with strategies to kind of drive better employee experience. Similarly, I think what is important is for example, if we talked about compensation benchmarking, right? When you do compensation benchmarking, what you need to look at is one, internal factors, which is within your organization, and then look at external factors, which will help in deciding the compensation. Because this is an industry which is quite, I would say, dynamic in nature, right? Today's industry is very dynamic in nature. So look at internal skills and internal data that you have, look at external data, and then you can use one of the prediction algorithms to build your compensation model. So different kind of problem will require different level of algorithm to kind of find the solution to your problem. Sometimes you also want to kind of forecast, right? How much employees would I need in the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years for different functions of an organization. So there the input parameters will be very different. There the input parameters would be generally the turnover across multiple years, what you are trying to achieve in the next few years, what is the growth rate that is expected, and all of these would feed into a forecasting model to forecast for the employees. So different algorithms will solve different problems for you in an HR setting. Yeah.
No, I think the question was that how do we make sure that the human touch is not adulterated with all these algorithms in place?
Okay. Oh, definitely. I did talk about different aspects where algorithms can be used. Now remember that HR is, although we kind of can drive a lot of data-driven decisioning, what we need to maintain is that human touch, and we don't want to lose it. I think it will be more and more beneficial if we can integrate the entire HR process with the data science, and the face who brings the output or who brings the outcome of the model still should be human, and that's where the human factor would be kind of intact. So we are not saying that we will do away with all of these human touch points that we have during an HR. What we are saying is that a lot of these decisions, which is basically an outcome of the entire process, would be taken in the backend by using these data. So I think some of these data science algorithms also preach that you should have more touch points with your employees. So basically, it talks about encouraging more and more human touch rather than doing away with it.
Okay, but you know, so at the end, the result would be brought by the HR, but in the whole process of when you are analyzing employees at different points, so the next question which is had is, would people develop hacks or way to impress the algorithm rather than the human now?
That's an interesting one. There is always two sides to everything, right? And I would say that although, yeah, people can do that, the percentage of people who would try to hack the system and fall in place would be much lesser than the people who would genuinely try to fit into the organization, right? In the right manner. So I wouldn't give so much importance to the hacking side of it. Of course, some of the behavior can be driven, right? So for example, if my algorithm says, and I'm just giving an example, then employees who do 30 hours of training in a month, I'm just giving an example, 30 hours of training in month are seen to perform better. So there might be a push in some functions from the leaders that, okay, this kind of behavior is appreciated, right? But I wouldn't say that someone would want to kind of hack around the system and work to get a better score in the entire system. That's not what generally happens, but this sounds more like a fraud problem to me, where there is a set of employees who are trying to hack the entire system that has been built in. But interesting, yeah. So I would say that it would drive some generic behavior, but would not need to hacking, etc. In that sense, yeah.
Okay. The next question we have is how HR analytics can help HRs and new employees from remote areas working from home in these changing times.
Okay, so how would HR analytics help people in remote areas? Okay, so I think one of the big enablers of remote working would be the data that you would be provided, right? A lot of data that we are currently talking about storing in form of digital form will help employees working in any part of the globe have access to this data. And once you start having access to more and more data, more and more information, you'll be in a place to take better decisions. Similarly, with all these, I would say, remote working going all the more out and open, what will be important is a frequent interaction, right, with your employees through virtual medium. So I think that is also being enabled by organizations across the globe, that you interact more and more frequently with the employees through different stand-up meetings or different ways of kind of engaging your employees through fitness mechanisms, etc. So I think the gap will narrow down between remote people and people working from office, rather than this gap increasing. At least that is what I see in the current pandemic and the outcome of this current pandemic. I think what positively is going to happen is that more and more people we will see will start working remotely, and that might be a very positive. What do I say? Flexible timings and all of those would lead to a very positive work environment in the longer run.
Okay. One question which I had was, so we spoke about being proactive in attrition. So would you want to talk about like which model do we use and what's the, like how the firms are becoming more proactive in reducing the attrition rates?
Sure. So when we build attrition model, basically what we are looking at is a performance period and then an outcome period. That is how we study attrition models, right? So, for example, if I have to define my performance period as 1 year, my outcome period will be defined as next 6 months, right? So when I start studying the behavior of my employees in the past 1 year in terms of how his leave has been, how his growth has been across the organization, his other matrices like compensation, his promotions, his interactions with other kind of surveys in the organization, those all data would help me predict that this employee is is having more probability to attract. And for these, as a start, we can also use a logistic regression model, because logistic regression model is a very fair model in the sense that we would know the exact features which are helping us predict the outcome of an attrition. So that will be one part. The other part is there is some behavior studies where not only just the data which is there with the HR, a lot of other behavior issues like coming to office, right? His work cycle, what time he comes to office, what time he goes, how many times. So we have seen a very interesting behavior that people tend to take more and more sick leaves who are about to attract. So that is because they have started looking out a lot more, have started kind of taking it a bit more easy. So once you have the data within your organization internally, try to do a variable information value kind of thing to see which are the variables which are most important, and try to build the attrition model using either a logistic regression framework or a decision tree. Also sometimes works very very well to predict attrition behavior.
Okay. One more question which I had was, so on the slide of the technology trends in the HR, so there was a thing which was mentioned that we will be using AR and VR. So could you give an example where AR VR is used?
Right. So one of the things that I personally kind of saw recently is there was this organization which would send me the first interview that they would send me would be a link, and I have to go to the link, and then they will ask the first question, and I have to answer that. Now I am sure that when they are making so much of effort to take a video interview, they are just not doing analysis of the content that I am speaking, but they are also doing an analysis of our body language, the way that we are kind of either stopping or not stopping between the communication, the kind of emphasis we are laying on the say on the soft skills within the organization and the technical skills required for the role. So for example, they had questions like how would you manage a project if it is given to you, and they would define the problem statement, right? So the approach that I will have, and I'm sure they would have a best set of answers. These are the keywords. If the person uses these keywords to solve this problem, then he is more likely a better fit. So that's a very good example of using a virtual mode to kind of assess a candidate. So that's very very helpful way of using AR VR. Organizations may also want to put you in a situation, right, in a virtual say meeting room kind of thing, and give you a problem statement or a presentation to do, especially in the sales side of it, right? If you are hiring people in sales, you would want to give them a dummy atmosphere where you are presenting to the client with some questions. So you can always create a robotic kind of environment for them, which will be more very closer to a virtual reality game that you would have played, where there will be clients sitting like basically images of clients sitting, and you ask them to make a presentation, and then the standard set of questions being fired at the sales professional. So yeah, some of these ways are innovative, and I'm sure there are many other ways which I might not have personally seen or can talk about, but a lot more ARs and VRs are currently being used in organizations.
Okay. I think we don't have any more questions. So thank you so much, Kavita. We are almost on time for today's session. Thank you so much for it. For anyone else, if you have any doubts, you can write us at witsmumbai@gmail.com, and we will forward your questions to Kavita. So thank you everyone for joining us. See you on next Saturday.
Thank you. Thanks, Khushboo, and thanks everyone for joining the webinar. It was lovely talking to all of you.
Thanks.
Have a nice weekend. Bye bye.